James, hi.
Hi, Dinara. Welcome back, everybody. So we're going to be looking at more reading today. Academic reading. And this topic, well, it's a fascinating topic, this one. It's on dung beetles. So as in very specific kind of insect. And there's many, many different species of this one. Exactly, and I think this one is on some varieties, the species that you get in Australia specifically.
So these are beetles which do something with animals.
Excrement. Yes, that's correct. Yeah, so as in I can't remember whether they live in them or they eat the animal's excrement. I think they eat it. So yeah, this is a charming topic. So yeah, exactly. So I think, as with everything, always have a look at when it comes to this, have a look at the answers, because then you'll know exactly what sort of response you're supposed to be looking for. So in this case, you're looking for its non-native species. You're looking for what kind of climate they like, as in if there is a complementary species exists, so one that is related, I'm presuming, and when they start being active and a number of generations per year. So you're looking for this information. So don't get too bogged down in the other parts of, in the other information in the text, because that's the most important part. So I'll start reading then. Introducing dung beetles into a pasture is a simple process. Approximately 1,500 beetles are released a handful at a time into fresh cow pats in cow pasture. The beetles immediately disappear beneath the pats, digging and tunneling, and if they successfully adapt to their new environment, soon become a permanent self-sustaining part of the local ecology. In time, they multiply, and within 3 or 4 years, the benefits to the pasture are obvious. Dung beetles work from the inside of the pat, so they are sheltered from predators such as birds and foxes. Most species burrow into the soil and bury dung in tunnels directly underneath the pats, which are hollowed out from within. Some large species originating from France excavate tunnels to a depth of approximately 30 centimeters below the dung pat. These beetles make sausage-shaped brood chambers along the tunnels. The shallowest tunnels belong to a much smaller Spanish species that buries dung in chambers that hang like fruit from the branches of a pear tree. South African beetles dig narrow tunnels of approximately 20 centimeters below the surface of the pat. Some surface-dwelling beetles, including a South African species, cut perfectly shaped balls from the pat, which are rolled away and attached to the bases of plants. For maximum dung burial in spring, summer, and autumn, farmers require a variety of species with overlapping periods of activity. In the cooler environments of the state of Victoria, the large French species, 2.5 centimeters long, is matched with smaller, half this size, temperate climate Spanish species. The former are slow to recover from the winter cold and produce only 1 or 2 generations of offspring from late spring until autumn. The latter, which multiply rapidly in early spring, produce 2 to 5 generations annually. The South African ball rolling species, being a subtropical beetle, prefers the climates of northern and coastal New South Wales, where it commonly works with the South African tunneling species. In warmer climates, many species are active for longer periods of the year.
So, guys, obviously, these type of articles, they are boring, but we wouldn't have another choice. Obviously, I suppose why they give such articles, because IELTS we pass to study at universities also. And some of you will study philology, some of you will study sciences, and that's why the universities, they want to be sure that you have enough vocabulary for both specialities, for humanitarian and scientific.
Absolutely. And I think also, obviously, it's to see generally how you cope with technical English. So it's probably another factor, I would imagine.
And with stress. Yeah, because when you read such boring articles, you're stressed.
Of course. I mean, you're not going to get more technical than non-native dung beetle species of Australia. So that's, so that's pretty specific, so let's have a look. The very first question that we've got, the first bit of information we need to put in is the preferred climate of Spanish dung beetles. So we're looking for the preferred climate, the start of the active period, and the numbers of generations per year. So we'll look at the preferred climate. So this one, you'll see that it was, I think... Sorry,
just have a funny comment. Glossary. In glossaries, obviously in these scientific articles, they cannot write shit.
Yes.
It's so funny how they write droppings. Or excreta. Excreta.
Excreta. Because, but the thing is that droppings, it doesn't quite work really, because droppings, when I associate the sort of animals that leave droppings, it tends to be things like mice, because they leave these small little pellets of droppings, or rabbits. But a cow pat is a big, it's like a disc, because obviously it's a big
pancake.
It's a big animal. So as in, so yeah, exactly. So they're going to be using a term that is less likely to be in common parlance, should we say? So that's what they're likely to do. Yeah.
I love this British way of being very polite and tactful. It's like it's very diplomatic, and it's if, for example, in Russia we study to become a diplomat, and in the UK it's natural for you.
Yeah, so it's very much so, as in trying to be polite is important, particularly in formal social settings, so especially. So, but I think that part of it is also just getting the register right. So you make sure that, as in if you're talking with friends and you're sitting around a table, using the word dung is a bit strange. It sounds, or excrement. It sounds, so if
too
you're
posh.
trying to sound, it's too posh, exactly. Whereas, using the word shit, it's a bit too blunt in academic writing or in a more formal setting where you're doing a research paper or something. It's just a little bit too blunt, So, although it is a very old and established word in the English language, so it comes from Old English, so, and that's the case with many of the swear words. Actually, they are very, very old. They've been around for a long time.
Interesting.
But yeah, so we're going to see. Obviously, that's not the case with all of them. Some of them are newer, but that particular one is older. So we're looking for the information about what climate the Spanish species live in. It's in the last paragraph, and it says temperate climate. And just to explain, if you don't know what temperate means, temperate is medium, sort of, or average. It's neither Arctic nor tropical. It's not incredibly cold or incredibly hot. It's in the middle, between the two.
And the word temperature and temperate, do they have the same root?
They may do, but temperate is a term that you get with behavior. So if you are temperate in your behavior, then it means that you're measured, you're composed, you are not prone to being very aggressive or very emotional, etc. You're quite composed. And specifically, so that, for example, in the past, the anti-alcohol movement that you got that was very popular in the late 19th century and the early 20th century was called the temperance movement. So and in the US, they actually succeeded in making alcohol illegal for 15 years. So that's where it's related to, I think, so whereas temperature, but they might be related. I'll have to double check them actually. Yeah, so they're through different borrowings, exactly. Yeah, so apparently they're through, so temperature comes from, so it's, so they come, so they're not related in English exactly, but they do come from the same root of a Latin word by the sounds. So that they are etymologically related, absolutely. So they come from the Latin temperamentum, so it's similar. So temperatura is for temperature, temperamentum for so they do have an etymological link. Absolutely.
You know that so in Russian we say temperatura for temperature, as Spanish do, and I've noticed that even Spanish speaking people, they say that it's easier for them to learn Russian than English.
Well, that's I think part of the reason for that is obviously in English you have temperature, so Spanish, it has some diphthongs, like you've got I and au and those sort of, so there are a few diphthongs, but English has a lot of diphthongs. It also has that schwa, which I don't think that actually exists in Spanish, but it's the most common vowel sound in English, which, so the, so for example, the, not as in up, I mean the as in as in the. That is the most common vowel sound in English. And then on top of that, as a Germanic language, and this is a feature that you get in all of the Germanic languages, is a large number of vowel sounds. So there's I can't remember exactly, I think there's about 14. So because you get all of the short, because every single one of the vowels, you have a short sound and a long sound. And that's
and changes
that the Romance languages, exactly. It, eat, for example, so, and or, so that's another one as well, and it does massively change the meaning in some cases. So, and that's quite a challenging feature because the Romance languages, none of them, so some of them have complex vowels, absolutely, like French has the nasal vowels, which are quite tricky to get used to. But they lack a distinction between short vowels and long vowels. So e doesn't exist, doesn't exist, or doesn't exist. So getting used to that many different vowel sounds is a little bit difficult, whereas Spanish, they're more sort of pure vowels, as it were. So so as in e or u.
And that's why I always tell our students that pronunciation is everything when we're talking about studying English, and like they have to be able to understand, especially British, you have to be very precise. And if you cannot pronounce certain sounds yourself, you will not be able to distinguish them when you hear you'll hear natives from the UK.
Absolutely. And unfortunately, that's also the case with some of the trickier sounds in English. So, as in when you look at the THs, for example. Yes, exactly. Because fin, so the only difference there is th, and one's a TH, the other's an F sound. And a fin is obviously, it's something that you get on the backs of fish, those little triangular things that stick up. Whereas thin means the opposite of fat, so it's, so it is quite, that is quite tricky. Absolutely. And it comes up in a lot of common words.
And sing, sing.
Yeah, exactly. Sing. Thing, yeah. So exactly, that's another one. So that's another one that's quite tricky. And I mean, specifically with English as well. Not only are there are also a large number of diphthongs, and you get certain cases where there are triphthongs as well, where you have 3 vowels together. So I'm just thinking of an example, but tourist, so. Ooh, so tourist, so you do get or fire, so that's so that's together, fire, so
guys, this information is very important because this is the reason why when foreigners they fail listening part, because they do not hear differences in those sounds, and obviously because of that they do not understand which word it is, and then they confuse everything.
Absolutely. And I think one final factor that you need to remember is obviously, particularly when native speakers are speaking quickly, there's a feature that English has. Well, some other languages have it as well, notably French, but a lot of languages don't, which is linked speech or elision. So where if you end with a consonant sound, then you will link it to the next word that begins with a vowel sound. So, for example, the sentence there are, if I say the sentence, there is a car outside. If I say those words slowly and individually, it's there is a car outside. If I say that quickly, there is a car outside. So it almost, as in
one word.
Yeah, it sounds like one word. There is a car outside, because you link one word to the next one. So there is, so r is and then car outside, so you've got the linked speech as well, which can make it difficult to distinguish where the words are. And so you've got to get used to that, unfortunately.
And obviously it's possible to be able to hear those sounds and to pronounce them only if you have lessons with natives. And I've noticed, by the way, people who can understand American accent and pronounce themselves, they find difficult to understand British.
That's so that's to do with some of the vowels sounds are a bit more clipped in British English. So that's part of it. Other factors are that there is. I mean, American English has a lot of variety as well, absolutely, and it depends a lot on whether you're talking about General American, which is a sort of collection of accents that are sort of the standard American English, versus, as in a Bostonian accent, or as in accents you get in New York, or, because there are so many accents in New York, or ones from the Deep South. Certain areas of the Deep South can be very difficult, like the Appalachian Mountains. They can be quite difficult to understand as well, or Minnesota has a very distinctive accent as well. So there is a lot of variety in American English, but British English is much more varied. So American English, you have that huge amount of variety, a large amount of variety east of the Mississippi. That's based on region and also, as in ethnic heritage, for example, as in, so it is limited more heavily towards the eastern side of the Mississippi. If you go further west, there's far less accent variation. there.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas, and that's because there's a significant amount of time. There's a significant amount of time where the language has had to develop and, make innovations and be isolated from other areas. Because, parts of the East Coast, you have maybe 400 years, but as a maximum for the English language to be, to develop like that. But in England itself and Britain itself, you have 3 times that, or more, so it's about 1,500 years of history of the language being used on the island. So, even if you go 10 kilometers away, the accent changes a bit. So, so the variation is huge. And RP, which is received pronunciation, the standard, quintessentially British accent that people think of.
Queen's English.
Yeah, the Queen's English. It is a prestige dialect. It's one that is spoken by 3 to 4% of the population. So, whereas most people will be speaking some variety of a local accent, or at least one that is influenced by the local accent. That's another thing that makes it much more difficult.
That's why I find strange that in listening part they give they give to hear Queen's English and so-called standard American English.
Yeah, general.
General American English, and it took me some time to be able to understand people from Texas, for example.
Yeah.
And I remember when I went to the hospital in London, the doctor, she was Irish. I could not understand what she was saying, and I said to her a lot of. In the end, I told her, like, I'm sorry, I literally don't understand you. I'm not. And she said, don't worry, because I'm Irish.
Yeah, absolutely. And it takes a while to get used to those accents and dialects. So, yeah, I think that what it is that there is this great tendency by textbooks in particular and sort of language courses to say, these are the 2 standards. But in reality, English is a much more varied and diverse language than that. I mean, we've got to remember that, as in, if you take a typical conversation that happens in English every day, it's usually by 2. It's actually more common for 2 L2 speakers to be speaking English together than 2 native English speakers in terms of every single conversation that happens in English. It's more common to get people who don't have it as their first language speak with each other. But then even within the sort of native English varieties, as it were, there's huge amounts of variation. So Australia has its own distinctive accent. There are distinctive accents in Canada. The USA has a huge amount of accent variations and dialect variations. New Zealand has a slightly different accent to Australia. In South Africa has a few different accents that you can hear as well. So, and Ireland has a number of accents. So there's and obviously there are many different patois and sort of Creole languages that are related to English that come from that have an English base that are spoken in the Caribbean that are very different. So. You have an extremely, and then, so Indian English has its own particular twang and its own particular, and it has many different accents within there as well, and that there's new varieties that are also being born, like Singlish in Singapore, that borrows heavily from Tamil and Mandarin and Hokkien and Malay. So it's because it's spoken in Singapore. So you get many different varieties of English. And yeah, exactly.
And of course, after listening to this information, you maybe are less motivated to study English. But like American films, American movies are really good for hearing different accents and teaching us to be able to hear them. For example, I studied with guys from Welsh, and it is not like you do not need so much time to be able to hear all these accents. For example, in like several years ago, I studied at university with guys from Wales, and it took me, I think, maximum 1 week to be able to learn to understand them.
Absolutely. It doesn't take that long. I mean, there are some accents that are more challenging than others. Absolutely. I mean, if you go to parts of Scotland, it will take longer than a week, but, you know, so it will take a bit longer. But many accents, you just need a short period of acclimatizing yourself to it. And it's, you know, so the thing is that but getting used to all the different accents, it's a good thing because it shows you, because English is a very decentralized language. It's I think it's the only one in the top 10 languages that are spoken on Earth. It is the only language that does not have an official spelling regulatory body that decides how words are spelt and which words should be used. There's no official body for the language. It's because it's very decentralized, and that makes it quite unique, because those authorities that decide which words, you know, can be used officially or how they should be spelt, etc., that doesn't exist in English. So it's quite decentralized, which is makes it a bit unique. So that might be motivating as well. So to learn it. Mm-hmm.
True.
Yeah, so we'll carry on with the words then. So temperate climate, exactly. So this one, so it's a temperate climate, number 9, temperate. Then number 10, what we're looking for is start of the active period. Okay, so we're looking the start of the active period. So we can see the former so former and the latter, two very good terms to remember. So when two things have been meant, or people have been mentioned in the previous sentence, the first one is the former and the second one is the latter. So the former are slow to recover from the winter cold and so they start being active in late spring. That's the French species. And then the latter, which multiply rapidly in early spring. So it sounds like early spring is the answer. Okay. So it's early spring for the Spanish species. And then we've also got the information in the same sentence, produce 2 to 5 generations annually. So it's 2 to 5 generations. So just to confirm, for the Spanish species, they prefer temperate climates. They start the start of the active period is early spring, and they have 2 to 5 generations per year. So
this task checks us on how we can analyze information in the text.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, and so you can see, and always be aware of this, is that you can often get 2 answers in a single sentence. So if you've got to really sort of focus your attention on, you know, as in, where am I seeing these words? So learning how to skim read is very vital in this context, in these sort of activities.
In the past, when I was preparing for IELTS, it taught me to analyze, to be better reader, even in the Russian language, because I've learned, thankfully, to IELTS to find keywords and key ideas.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so now we've got the last question here, 12 and 13. So subtropical South African tunneling. Are the 2 answers for that. Right, so the 2 answers for that, I'll just show you where that was. So that was back on, so the preferred climate. So this is in the last 4 lines, the South African bull rolling species being a subtropical beetle. Okay. So that is the climate, subtropical. And then 13, the complementary species prefers the climate of northern, where it commonly works with the South African tunneling species. So South African tunneling is the complementary species.
Complementary, it means like close?
Yeah, works with or goes together, exactly. And this is a good example of where you get these words that are quite, where you have a similar word that is pronounced, and it's pronounced the same, complementary, and complement. Compliment is like, for example, oh, you're really smart. So that's a compliment, whereas complementary or, compliment, in this case, it means it goes together with it, or it's, you can also have it in the context of it's something that you get free as an extra. So it goes together. So they work together, in other words.
I still don't understand. What do you mean work together? They live together?
Not necessarily that they live together. So you see the example with the French and the Spanish species are complementary because back with the French, so the farmers need overlapping periods of activity. So that's why the French and the Spanish species work well together, because the Spanish species starts off earlier in spring and it's got several generations annually, whereas whereas the French species, they take a bit longer, but they can cope with the cooler weather better. So they work well together.
I see. So they are quite certain species. They are similar to each other. Yeah,
exactly. Well, even if they're not similar to each other, they can get the task done together because they overlap in the right way, or they overlap in the right period.
They have something in common.
Yeah, exactly.
For example, we are both interested in linguistics and we complement each other.
Yes, exactly. Right? You can say that perfectly.
Cool.
Exactly.
Cool. Thank you. As usual, very interesting. I myself learn a lot through making videos with you, from you. Yeah. And guys, as you see, it is not as easy, but so we make those videos for you to make your life easier for preparing IELTS. And if you need extra help in preparing for IELTS, you can write us on our social media, on WhatsApp, and we'll find a way for you how we can help, like through group classes or individual classes. And James, very happy and grateful that you help us with this YouTube channel, and looking forward for the next class.
Yeah, absolutely. And also, thank so always a pleasure, and see you next time, everybody.